My boss humiliated me at the company party. You'll never amount to anything, he laughed with the executives. I just smiled and quit the next day. 6 months later, his company was begging me to come back. This morning, my phone lit up with 47 missed calls. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there, scattered through my 3 years at Meridian Tech. Small comments in performance reviews. The way Tim Richardson, my boss, would take credit for my ideas in meetings. How my promotion kept getting delayed for budget reasons, while he hired his golf buddies for senior positions. But when you've spent years building your career at a company, you give people the benefit of the doubt. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. It started with the quarterly numbers. Our department had been struggling, and Tim was feeling the heat from the board. The pressure rolled downhill, with Tim micromanaging everything. He'd hover behind my desk, questioning every decision, suggesting my methods were outdated despite our clients loving my work. "Just do it my way, Alex," he'd say. "There's a reason I'm the boss and you're not." I stayed late, worked weekends, brought in 3 major clients that saved our quarterly targets. The night of the company holiday party, I actually felt optimistic. Maybe things would turn around. Maybe Tim would finally acknowledge my contributions. The party was at some upscale hotel downtown. Open bar, fancy appetizers, everyone dressed to impress. I was talking to May from accounting when I overheard Tim's booming laugh from across the room. He was with the executive team, champagne in hand. "Can you believe it?" Tim was saying. Alex actually thought the Jenkins account was thanks to his presentation. As if Jenkins wasn't already in the bag through my golf connection with their CFO. My stomach dropped. I moved closer, pretending to grab an appetizer. "The kid thinks he's ready for management," Tim continued, his voice slightly slurred. "I keep him dangling with that promotion talk, but between us, he'll never advance here. Not while I have a say." The CFO, Sandra Peters, actually looked uncomfortable. "Tim, maybe this isn't the place." "Oh, come on," Tim laughed, louder now. "Everyone knows it. Alex is competent, sure, but management material? Please. Some people just need to accept their ceiling. You'll never amount to anything beyond a worker bee, Alex." That's when he realized I was standing right behind him. The room didn't go silent like in movies. The party continued around us, but our little bubble felt frozen in time. Tim's face registered shock, then embarrassment, then something worse, a complete lack of remorse. "Alex," he recovered quickly, slapping my shoulder too hard. "Just joking around, you know how it is. Have another drink." I didn't make a scene. Didn't throw my drink in his face. I just smiled, a genuine smile that seemed to throw him off more than anger would have. I nodded to the executives, said, "Enjoy your evening," and walked away. The revelation wasn't that Tim was an asshole. I'd known that. It was that I'd spent 3 years trying to prove myself to someone who had already decided I wasn't worth investing in. 3 years of missed weekends, strained relationships, and constant stress, all to impress someone who was actively holding me back. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I dressed in my best suit, not my usual business casual attire, and drove to the office early. I wrote a simple resignation letter, cleared my desk of personal items, and waited for Tim to arrive. He strolled in around 9:30, looking hungover and irritated. When he saw me sitting there in a suit with a box on my desk, his expression shifted to confusion. "What's with the get-up?" "Client meeting," he asked, coffee in hand. I handed him the resignation letter. "Effective immediately. My projects are documented, and I've emailed transition notes to the team." Tim skimmed the letter, his face reddening. "Is this about last night? Come on, Alex. You know how these parties get." I was just blowing off steam. "It's not just about last night," I replied calmly. "Last night just made things clear. I've given everything to this company, and I now realize I've been investing in the wrong place." He switched tactics immediately. "Look, we can discuss that promotion. In fact, I was planning to bring it up next week. The Jenkins account really impressed the board." "The Jenkins account that was in the bag through your golf connection." I quoted his words back to him. Tim's face fell. He knew he was caught. "Don't be hasty. The job market is tough right now. I'll take my chances. As I stood to leave, Tim's expression hardened. You know, I can make it difficult for you to find another position in this industry. People respect my opinion. I just smiled. I'm sure they do. Goodbye, Tim. Walking out those doors felt like shedding 100 pounds of dead weight. I didn't have another job lined up. I had savings for 3 months, maybe 4 if I was careful. But something told me this was the right move. That afternoon, my phone started blowing up. Colleagues texting to ask what happened. May called to say Tim was telling everyone I'd had a mental breakdown over being passed over for promotion. HR emailed asking for an exit interview. I ignored them all and spent the day updating my resume and LinkedIn profile. By evening, I'd applied to 15 positions and reached out to my network. Then I turned off my phone and took myself out for the best steak dinner I'd had in years. Over the next week, the story at Meridian evolved. Tim was apparently telling people I couldn't handle the pressure and quit in a childish fit. But Sandra, the CFO who had witnessed his comments at the party, was quietly telling a different story. I knew this because 3 former colleagues reached out, asking if I was okay and mentioning they'd heard what really happened. That's office politics for you. The truth always leaks eventually. 2 weeks after quitting, I had my first interview with Vertex Solutions, Meridian's biggest competitor. They'd been trying to poach talent from Meridian for years, and my resume had caught their attention immediately. We're particularly interested in your work on the Jenkins account, the hiring manager said. That was quite the coup in the industry. I didn't mention Tim's claim about his golf connection. Instead, I walked them through my strategy for winning the client, showing my presentation and the custom solution I developed. By the end of the interview, they offered me a position, not just as a team member, but as a department head with a 40% salary increase over what I'd been making at Meridian. We need someone who can think outside the box, they explained. And frankly, we've been watching Meridian lose market share for months. Their approach is outdated. I accepted on the spot. That night, I finally turned my phone back on to update my LinkedIn with my new position. 107 missed calls. 89 text messages. 53 emails. Most were from Tim. The messages started professional enough. Alex, let's discuss your resignation. HR needs to process your exit paperwork. But they quickly devolved. You're making a huge mistake. This is career suicide. Nobody walks out on Meridian like this. The last few were sent at 2 a.m., barely coherent. You'll regret this. Good LCK finding anything in this industry. I deleted them all without responding and went to bed. My first day at Vertex was everything Meridian wasn't. My team was talented and motivated. The executive board actually listened to ideas. Most importantly, I had autonomy to build strategies that made sense, not just ones that made my boss look good. Within a month, I had restructured the department, implemented new tracking metrics, and started developing a pitch for one of Meridian's biggest clients, Westfield Insurance. I knew their contract was coming up for renewal, and I also knew Meridian had been taking them for granted. That's when the LinkedIn messages started coming in from my former colleagues. Turns out, things at Meridian were falling apart. Without me handling the major accounts, Tim was drowning. The meticulous documentation I'd left wasn't enough. He didn't understand the relationships, the specific pain points of each client, the carefully balanced promises I'd made. Jenkins was threatening to leave. 2 other major clients had already jumped ship. The board was asking questions about the sudden exodus. Tim's been in meetings all week, May wrote. He looks terrible. Keeps saying the clients are being unreasonable. I didn't respond to any of these messages directly. Instead, I focused on building something better at Vertex. My team landed 3 new major clients in 2 months, a company record. The CEO personally congratulated me at the quarterly meeting. Whatever they were paying you at Meridian, we got a bargain, he joked. 3 months after I left Meridian, I was having lunch with my team when my phone rang. Unknown number. I normally wouldn't answer, but we were waiting to hear back from a potential client, so I picked up. Is this Alex Mitchell? A woman's voice, professional but tense. Speaking. This is Sandra Peters, CFO at Meridian Tech. My team looked up curiously as I excused myself from the table. Hello, Sandra. What can I do for you? She cleared her throat. I'll be direct. We're facing some challenges with client retention since your departure. The board has concerns about our current leadership structure. I waited, saying nothing. Tim Richardson has been. Well, he's been placed on administrative leave pending a review. I still said nothing. Let her fill the silence. The board would like to discuss the possibility of your return to Meridian. In a leadership capacity, of course. With appropriate compensation adjustments. I almost laughed. 3 months ago, I wasn't management material. Now they wanted me to come back and clean up Tim's mess? I appreciate the call, Sandra, but I'm very happy at Vertex. We're prepared to make a compelling offer, she pressed. Whatever they're paying you, we can match it. Plus signing bonus. It's not about the money, I replied honestly. It's about working somewhere my contributions are valued. They are valued, Alex. The board recognizes that now. Tim's perspective was limited. With all due respect, the board only recognized my value after I left and things fell apart. That doesn't exactly inspire confidence. Sandra sighed. Will you at least consider meeting with us? No commitments. Just a conversation. I thought about it. Not because I was interested in going back, I wasn't. But because sometimes, closure means looking your past in the eye and knowing you've moved beyond it. I can give you 30 minutes next week. That's all. After hanging up, I returned to my team lunch, mind racing. The tables had turned so completely, so quickly. But the satisfaction I felt wasn't about Tim's downfall or Meridian's struggles. It was about finally being in a place where I was respected for my work. That night, I updated my team on our strategy for the Westfield insurance pitch. We were going to win it, not out of vengeance, but because we had a better solution. The fact that it would be another blow to Meridian was just a bonus. As I drove home, my phone started ringing again. Tim's number. I sent it to voicemail. Whatever he had to say, I didn't need to hear it. I'd moved on. But the calls didn't stop. 5, 10, 15 missed calls. Finally, a text, Alex please. I need to talk to you. My career is on the line. I remembered all the times I'd needed his support, his recognition, his basic human decency. All the times he'd thrown me under the bus or taken credit for my work. I blocked his number and turned on some music for the rest of my drive home. The meeting with Meridian's board was set for Wednesday morning at a neutral location, a conference room at the Four Seasons Hotel. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed impeccably in a suit I couldn't have afforded during my Meridian days. Sandra was already there with 2 board members I recognized. They all stood when I entered, something that would never have happened 3 months ago. Alex, thank you for coming, Sandra began, gesturing to a seat at the head of the table, another calculated show of respect. I can only stay for 30 minutes, I reminded them, checking my watch. I have a team to get back to. The older board member, Richard Henley, leaned forward. We'll get straight to the point then. Meridian is facing a crisis of confidence with our clients. Since your departure, we've lost 7 major accounts. Jenkins is on the verge of leaving. Our Q3 projections are concerning. I nodded but said nothing. We've conducted an internal review, Sandra continued. It's become clear that Tim Richardson was, let's say, misrepresenting certain aspects of the department's functioning. Taking credit for relationship management and strategic initiatives that were actually your work. You don't say, I replied dryly. Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably. The board feels we may have overlooked your contributions based on misleading information. We'd like to rectify that error. The third person, a woman I recognized as new to the board, slid a folder across the table. Inside was an offer letter for the position of Vice President of Client Strategy, a role that would put me 2 levels above Tim's position, reporting directly to the C-suite. The salary figure made me blink. It was nearly double what I was making at Vertex, which was already a significant bump from my Meridian salary. This also comes with stock options and a signing bonus, Sandra added. Plus full autonomy over your department, including personnel decisions. Personnel decisions. They were giving me the power to fire Tim. I closed the folder without commenting on the numbers. Where is Tim now? The three exchanged glances. Richard answered, still on administrative leave. He's not taking it well. The board will make a final decision on his employment this Friday. I nodded slowly. And if I were to accept this position, you'd expect me to clean up the client relationships immediately. Save Jenkins. Bring back the others. We know it's a big ask, the female board member said. But your track record suggests you're capable of it. My track record that, until recently, the board ignored completely, I pointed out. Sandra at least had the decency to look embarrassed. We made a mistake, Alex. A significant one. We're trying to correct it. I checked my watch again. I appreciate the offer. I do. But I need to be honest with you, I'm not interested in returning to Meridian. Their faces fell in perfect unison. Vertex values my work. They promoted me based on merit, not desperation. And frankly, the culture there is healthier than anything I experienced at Meridian. We can change the culture, Richard insisted. With you in leadership. Culture comes from the top, I interrupted. And the top leadership at Meridian allowed someone like Tim to thrive for years while pushing away talented people. That doesn't change overnight with one hiring decision. I stood up, our 30 minutes nearly exhausted. I'm flattered by the offer, but I must decline. As I turned to leave, Sandra called after me. Alex, please. At least take a few days to think about it. The offer stands until Friday. I paused at the door. Out of curiosity, what happened with Westfield Insurance? Their contract with you is up soon, isn't it? The look on their faces told me everything. They were in real trouble. They're reviewing their options, Richard admitted. I nodded. As they should. Good luck with your search. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from my assistant at Vertex. Westfield called. They want to move our pitch up to tomorrow. They're very interested in what we have to offer. I smiled and started the engine. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting even. It's moving forward while others remain stuck in their mistakes. Back at Vertex, I gathered my team to prepare for the Westfield pitch. As we worked, my phone kept lighting up with calls from Meridian's board members. I silenced it without a second thought. That evening, as I was leaving the office, the CEO of Vertex stopped me in the hallway. Heard you had a meeting with Meridian today, he said casually. News travels fast in our industry. They made an offer. I declined. He smiled. Glad to hear it. We've got big plans for you here, Alex. The kind of plans that wouldn't fit in a desperate counteroffer. I nodded, appreciating his confidence. I'm exactly where I want to be. And I meant it. The satisfaction of declining Meridian's offer was nothing compared to the joy of building something valuable with people who actually recognized my worth. The Westfield pitch went even better than expected. My team was prepared, confident, and had developed a customized solution that addressed problems Westfield didn't even know they had yet. When I explained how we'd streamline their claims processing and reduce overhead by 22%, their CFO actually whistled. This is comprehensive, the Westfield CEO said, flipping through our proposal. Meridian never dug this deep into our operations. I smiled professionally. At Vertex, we believe in truly understanding our clients' businesses. It's not about selling you a service, it's about becoming a partner in your success. After our presentation, their team asked for a few minutes to confer privately. My team and I stepped into the hallway, trying not to look too confident. They're going to sign, whispered Aaron, my senior analyst. Did you see their faces during the ROI breakdown? I nodded but kept my cool. Nothing's certain until the contract is signed. 5 minutes later, we were called back in. The Westfield CEO stood and extended his hand to me. We'd like to move forward with Vertex, pending final contract review. Your approach is exactly what we've been looking for. Handshakes all around, promises of contract details to follow. As we were packing up, the CEO pulled me aside. I should mention, Meridian made a last-ditch effort yesterday. Sent their whole executive team. Promised us the moon. I raised an eyebrow. But it felt desperate. And when we asked specifically who would be handling our account, they couldn't give a straight answer. He shook his head. Too many red flags. Plus, your reputation precedes you. Industry circles are talking about your move to Vertex. I thanked him for his confidence in us and headed back to the office with my team, trying not to look too triumphant. The celebration at Vertex that afternoon was modest but genuine. Champagne in the conference room, congratulations from colleagues, a personal email from the CEO. That evening, as I was leaving, my assistant caught me. "Alex, you might want to see this." She handed me her phone, open to LinkedIn. Tim Richardson had posted a lengthy rambling update about betrayal in business and ungrateful employees without naming names. It was clearly about me, and clearly written in a state of extreme distress. The comments were brutal. Former colleagues were calling him out directly. Clients were posting pointed questions about specific promises he'd made. Even competitors were chiming in with thinly veiled jabs. I handed the phone back without commenting. "Anything else I need to know before I leave?" Just that Meridian called again. 3 times. They've upped their offer. I shook my head. "Tell them I'm in meetings for the rest of the week if they call again." On my drive home, I couldn't help but reflect on how quickly things had changed. 3 months ago, I'd walked out of Meridian with nothing but my dignity and determination. Now I had everything they'd never given me: respect, authority, recognition, and the sweet satisfaction of knowing I'd earned it all on my own terms. My phone rang through my car speakers. Sandra's number. I almost declined it, then decided to answer. Better to end this cleanly. "Alex, please don't hang up," she began, her voice tight with stress. "The board has authorized me to offer you full executive status. EVP title, compensation package in line with C-suite, and—" "Sandra," I interrupted gently. "It's not happening. I appreciate the offers, but I've moved on." "Jenkins is leaving," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "They've already given notice. Without them, we'll miss our quarterly targets by double digits. The shareholders—" "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and surprisingly, I meant it. Many good people still worked at Meridian. They didn't deserve to suffer for Tim's failures or the board's negligence. "Is there anything we can do?" she asked quietly. I thought for a moment. Yes. Build a better company culture. Value your talented employees before they leave. Don't wait until you're desperate to recognize worth. There was a long pause. "Also," I added, "Tim's LinkedIn meltdown isn't helping your professional image. Might want to address that." She sighed heavily. "He's been let go. Effective immediately." That post was his response. I wasn't surprised, but I didn't feel the rush of vindication I might have expected. "I wish you all the best, Sandra. I really do." As I pulled into my driveway, I felt strangely at peace. The urgency of revenge had faded, replaced by something more valuable, the quiet confidence that comes from building a life on your own terms. Inside, I found a package had been delivered. A bottle of champagne from my new team with a card, "To new beginnings and better journeys. Thank you for leading the way." I smiled and set it aside, no longer needing external validation to know my worth. The fall of Meridian happened faster than anyone in the industry expected. It wasn't just Jenkins and Westfield. Within 2 months, they'd lost over 40% of their major accounts. Their stock took a nosedive after the Q3 earnings call. Rumors of layoffs and restructuring were everywhere. I didn't take pleasure in watching the company struggle. Many good people worked there, people who'd had nothing to do with Tim's behavior or the board's negligence. But I couldn't deny the poetic justice of it all. Meanwhile, Vertex was thriving. My department was now the fastest-growing division in the company. We'd landed 3 more major clients, including 2 former Meridian accounts who approached us without any solicitation on our part. Word was spreading. Friday morning, 6 months after I'd walked out of Meridian, I arrived at the office to find an unusual visitor waiting in our reception area. Rachel Davis, Meridian's new CEO. The receptionist looked apologetic. "She doesn't have an appointment, but she insisted on waiting." Rachel stood when she saw me, extending her hand. "Alex Mitchell. I was hoping we could talk." I recognized her from industry events, but had never spoken with her directly. She'd been brought in from outside to replace Meridian's previous CEO, who'd stepped down to pursue other opportunities, corporate speak for being forced out after the disastrous quarterly results. I've got 15 minutes before my next meeting, I said, leading her to a small conference room. Once seated, she got straight to the point. I won't waste your time with another job offer. I understand you've declined several already. I nodded, relieved. I'm here because I'm trying to rebuild Meridian from the ground up. New leadership, new culture, new approach. But we're facing an uphill battle. She looked tired but determined. The industry perception is that we've lost our edge. That all our top talent jumped ship. That perception isn't entirely wrong, I pointed out. No, it's not, she agreed. Which is why I'm proposing something different. A partnership between Meridian and Vertex on the Goldstein project. I raised my eyebrows. Goldstein Industries was the biggest potential client in our sector, a global corporation looking to consolidate their services under one provider. Every firm in our industry was competing for it. A partnership? That's unusual. Unprecedented, she acknowledged. But hear me out. Vertex has the innovative approach and the rising star reputation. Meridian still has the legacy infrastructure and global reach. Together, we could offer something no other competitor could match. It was an intriguing proposition. Professionally speaking, it made a certain amount of sense. But personally, why me specifically? Vertex has other department heads. Rachel smiled thinly. Because everyone knows you built the client relationships that kept Meridian afloat for years. And everyone knows how they lost you. Having you involved in this partnership would send a powerful message about the new Meridian we're building. Ah. So this was about optics as much as business strategy. What does your board think about this idea? I asked. The board has been restructured, she replied carefully. After the Q3 results, several members resigned. The remaining members have given me full authority to rebuild as I see fit. I leaned back, considering the proposal. And Tim? Gone. Along with several other executives who shared his approach to management. I nodded slowly. I'll need to discuss this with my team and Vertex leadership. This isn't a decision I can make unilaterally. Of course, she stood, offering her hand again. All I ask is that you consider it. This could be beneficial for both companies, and show the industry what real leadership looks like. After she left, I sat in the conference room, turning the idea over in my mind. 6 months ago, I would have laughed at the thought of working with Meridian in any capacity. Now, with Tim gone and new leadership in place, it wasn't so absurd. And there was something undeniably satisfying about the idea of returning as a partner rather than an employee. About helping rebuild what had been broken, but on my own terms. My phone buzzed with a text from May, who still worked at Meridian. Is it true? New CEO went to Vertex to see you? Whole office is buzzing. I smiled at the message. The rumor mill was as efficient as ever. Before I could reply, another message came through, this one from an unknown number. Alex, it's Tim. We need to talk. Please. My thumb hovered over the delete button, then paused. Tim reaching out now was unexpected. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave that chapter firmly closed. But another part was curious. What could he possibly have to say after all this time? I put my phone away without responding to either message. I had a team meeting in 5 minutes and a partnership proposal to consider. Tim's drama could wait. As I walked to the meeting room, I couldn't help but reflect on how completely the tables had turned. 6 months ago, I'd been the one desperate for recognition and opportunity. Now, I was the one being courted, being asked to consider partnerships and collaborations. The irony wasn't lost on me. But more importantly, I realized that my satisfaction came not from seeing Tim fail or Meridian struggle, but from knowing I had succeeded on my own terms. My team was waiting, eager to hear about the unexpected visitor from Meridian. As I explained Rachel's proposal, I could see the mixture of surprise and intrigue on their faces. So, what do you think? I asked after outlining the partnership idea. Professionally speaking, not personally. Aaron, always analytical, spoke first. The Goldstein account would be huge. Combining our innovation with their infrastructure could give us an edge over the other bidders. But can we trust them? Asked Marcus, my newest team member. After how they treated you. I appreciated his loyalty but shook my head. This isn't about me. New leadership, new approach. We evaluate this on its business merits. We spent the next hour dissecting the proposal from every angle. By the end, there was cautious consensus. The partnership could work, with the right parameters and protections in place. I'll speak with our CEO, I concluded. If leadership is open to it, we'll proceed with initial discussions. As the team filed out, my assistant handed me a note. Sandra Peters called. Said it's important but not urgent. Sandra, still at Meridian as CFO. Interesting that she was reaching out separately from Rachel's visit. The web of connections and complications surrounding Meridian continued to expand. But for the first time, I felt completely in control of my role in that story. I picked up my phone and finally responded to May's text. Yes, it's true. But not what anyone is probably thinking. Things are about to get interesting. The meeting with Vertex's executive team about the Meridian partnership proposal was set for Monday morning. I spent the weekend preparing my presentation, carefully outlining the potential benefits and risks. By Sunday evening, I felt confident in my analysis, but something was still nagging at me. Tim's text. Against my better judgment, I pulled out my phone and reread his message. Alex, it's Tim. We need to talk. Please. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe I just wanted complete closure before potentially working with Meridian again, but I finally replied, "What do you want to talk about?" His response came almost immediately. "Thank you for responding. Can we meet? In person?" I hesitated, then suggested a coffee shop near my apartment, public enough to be comfortable but quiet enough for a real conversation. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. I can give you 20 minutes. I'll be there. Thank you. The next morning, I arrived early, choosing a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. I wasn't especially nervous, but old habits die hard. When Tim walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. The confident swagger was gone. He looked thinner, older, his normally immaculate appearance noticeably disheveled. His eyes darted around the cafe until they landed on me. He approached cautiously, like I might bolt if he moved too quickly. "Alex. Thank you for meeting me." I gestured to the chair across from me. "You have 20 minutes. Tim sat down, hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee he must have purchased elsewhere. "I've been trying to reach you for months." "I know." He nodded, accepting my coolness. I deserved that. I deserved all of it, really. I said nothing, just watched him. "I lost everything after you left," he continued. "My position, my reputation, eventually my marriage. Christine couldn't handle the change in our circumstances." Again, I remained silent. His personal problems weren't my concern. Tim took a deep breath. "I'm not here to ask for anything. Or to make excuses. I needed to tell you something. I'm listening. You were right to leave. I was a terrible boss. Worse than that, I actively sabotaged you because I felt threatened by your talent." He stared into his coffee cup. "I've had a lot of time to think about why I did what I did. It's not pretty." "No, it's not," I agreed. "The thing is, I knew how good you were. From the beginning. That's why I kept taking credit for your work, why I blocked your promotion. I was terrified you'd surpass me. And in trying to prevent that, I guaranteed it would happen." He gave a bitter laugh. Self-fulfilling prophecy. I sipped my coffee, studying him. His confession seemed genuine, but I'd seen Tim put on performances before. "I've started therapy," he continued when I didn't respond. "Trying to understand why I felt so threatened, why I needed to put others down to feel secure. It's been illuminating." "Good for you," I said, not unkindly. "Self-improvement is important." Tim finally looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I recognize what I did. To you and to others. And I'm trying to be better." I nodded slowly. "What are you doing now? For work?" "Consulting," he said with a slight grimace. "Small businesses, nowhere near our industry. It's a step down, but it's something." We sat in silence for a moment. Then I checked my watch. "Your 20 minutes are almost up." "Right." Tim straightened. "There's one more thing. I heard about Rachel Davis approaching Vertex. About the potential partnership. My guard instantly went up. How did you hear about that? I still have contacts at Meridian. The point is, I think you should do it. That surprised me. You do. Tim nodded. You'd be good for Meridian. The company wasn't all bad, just some of the leadership. Including me. He stood, preparing to leave. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for listening. As he turned to go, I found myself speaking. Tim. He paused, looking back. I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I appreciate you owning your mistakes. A faint smile crossed his face. That's more than I deserve. Good luck with everything, Alex. You earned it. I watched him leave, feeling strangely unsettled. The Tim Richardson I'd known would never have admitted fault or praised a former subordinate. Either he'd changed significantly, or this was an elaborate act. But to what end? On my drive to the office, I turned the conversation over in my mind. Something about it felt off, but I couldn't place what. By the time I arrived for the executive meeting, I'd pushed it aside to focus on the partnership proposal. Vertex's leadership team listened intently as I presented the potential Meridian partnership. The CEO asked pointed questions about trust and integration, which I answered honestly. By the end, there was cautious interest. Set up a preliminary meeting with their team, the CEO concluded. Explore the parameters, but make no commitments yet. We need to be certain this serves our interests. As I was gathering my materials, he added, and Alex, good job seeing the strategic opportunity here instead of letting personal history cloud your judgment. I nodded in acknowledgement, though Tim's strange visit still lingered in the back of my mind. Back at my desk, I had a new email from Sandra Peters. Alex, I need to speak with you privately before any formal partnership discussions begin. It's important. The vague urgency of her message raised my suspicions. What did Sandra know that she couldn't share through official channels? I responded suggesting a phone call that afternoon. Her reply came quickly, not by phone. In person. Somewhere private. Now I was definitely concerned. Something wasn't adding up. First Tim's unexpected apology, now Sandra's clandestine request. I called May, hoping she might have some insight into what was happening at Meridian. There are rumors, she said cautiously, about the real reason for the CEO change. And about Rachel Davis's background. Nothing concrete, but enough whispers to make people nervous. What kind of whispers? May hesitated. The kind that suggests the company's problems might run deeper than Tim's poor management or client relationships. My instincts had been right. There was something beneath the surface here, something that could change everything about the potential partnership, and perhaps explain Tim's sudden appearance in my life again. I agreed to meet Sandra that evening at a restaurant across town, far from both Vertex and Meridian offices. Whatever she had to tell me, I needed to hear it before things went any further. As I prepared for the meeting, my phone buzzed with another text from Tim. Did you think about what I said? I stared at the message, a new suspicion forming. What if Tim's apparent redemption arc was connected to whatever Sandra wanted to tell me? What if his advice to pursue the partnership wasn't as selfless as it seemed? I left the text unanswered and focused on preparing for what might be a very revealing conversation with Sandra. The restaurant Sandra chose was deliberately low-key, a family-owned Italian place with private booths and minimal chance of running into industry colleagues. I arrived 15 minutes early, requesting a corner table with a view of both entrances, an old habit that had served me well. Sandra arrived precisely on time, dressed in her usual impeccable business attire but looking noticeably tense. She scanned the restaurant before approaching my table. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Your message was intriguing," I replied. Hard to ignore. The server approached, but Sandra waved him off. "Just water for now, thank you." Once we were alone, she leaned forward, voice lowered. "What I'm about to tell you isn't public knowledge. If anyone knew I was speaking to you about this, I'd lose more than my job." My curiosity was fully piqued now. "I'm listening." She took a deep breath. "The partnership Rachel is proposing with Vertex? It's not what it seems." I figured as much. What's the real angle? Meridian is in worse shape than anyone realizes. The Q3 results we published? They were artificially inflated. I sat back, absorbing this. You're talking about fraud. Sandra nodded grimly. The previous CEO authorized it with support from 2 board members. Rachel was brought in not to rebuild, but to manage the crisis when it inevitably breaks. And it will break, Alex. The auditors are already asking questions. Why tell me this? You're putting yourself at risk. Because I was complicit, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Not in creating the fraud, but in failing to stop it when I first noticed discrepancies. I convinced myself it was just aggressive accounting, that we'd make up the difference in Q4. She looked down at her untouched water. I was wrong. And now Rachel is trying to use Vertex as a life raft. Specifically, she's using you. How does the partnership help them hide accounting fraud? It's complex, but essentially, a major partnership announcement would boost investor confidence, potentially raise the stock price, and give them leverage to secure additional financing. Most importantly, it would allow them to merge certain operations and obscure the worst of the financial discrepancies. My mind was racing. And Tim? Where does he fit into all this? Sandra looked surprised. You've spoken with Tim? He reached out. Wanted to apologize. Encouraged me to pursue the partnership with Meridian. Her expression darkened. Tim knows about the financial issues. He was part of the inner circle before they scapegoated him for the client losses. My guess is he's trying to get back in their good graces by helping facilitate the partnership. Using me. Again. The irony was almost too perfect. Yes. I'm sorry, Alex. I studied her carefully. Why are you really telling me this, Sandra? Guilty conscience alone doesn't explain the risk you're taking. She met my gaze steadily. Because I respected you even when I didn't show it. Because what they did to you was wrong. And because I don't want to see Vertex dragged down with Meridian when this all explodes. The server returned, asking if we were ready to order. We both asked for more time, waiting until he was well out of earshot before continuing. Do you have proof? I asked. Documentation of the fraud? Sandra hesitated, then reached into her bag and slid a small flash drive across the table. Everything I've been able to compile is here. Emails, altered financial statements, the original numbers before manipulation. It's enough to raise serious questions. I pocketed the drive, mind already working on next steps. What's your play here, Sandra? After warning me, what do you plan to do? I've anonymously contacted the SEC, she said. But these investigations take time. I'm hoping to buy enough of it to quietly extract myself from the situation. I nodded, understanding her position. And if I take this information to Vertex leadership? That's your decision. I'm just making sure you have all the facts before you tie your company's reputation to a sinking ship. We ordered food we barely touched, maintaining the appearance of a normal business dinner while discussing the implications of her revelations. By the time we finished, I had a clear picture of Meridian's desperate gambit and my role in their plans. As we prepared to leave, Sandra reached across the table, briefly touching my hand. Be careful, Alex. Rachel is much more ruthless than she appears. I always am. Walking to my car, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Vindication that my instincts about Meridian had been right all along. Anger at being manipulated by Tim yet again. But mostly, I felt a cold clarity about what needed to happen next. My phone buzzed with a text from Tim. Have you made a decision about the partnership? I stared at the message for a long moment before responding, yes. Meeting Rachel tomorrow to discuss next steps. His reply came quickly, good decision. You won't regret it. Oh, but someone would regret it. Just not me. Back home, I connected Sandra's flash drive to my computer, carefully reviewing the documents she'd provided. The evidence was damning, clear patterns of revenue manipulation, artificial inflation of client contract values, hidden liabilities. Meridian wasn't just struggling, it was functionally insolvent, propped up by accounting fiction. I worked late into the night, preparing 2 presentations. The first, for Vertex leadership, detailed everything I'd learned about Meridian's true financial state, complete with supporting documentation. The second, for my meeting with Rachel, outlined a partnership framework that appeared beneficial while revealing nothing of my knowledge. Around 2 a.m., I received an unexpected email from Rachel Davis, looking forward to our meeting tomorrow. I believe this partnership will be transformative for both companies, bringing additional team members to discuss integration specifics. I smiled grimly at the screen. Transformative indeed, but not in the way she was expecting. Before going to bed, I sent a message to our CEO requesting an urgent meeting first thing in the morning, before my scheduled session with Rachel. His response was immediate, despite the late hour, my office, 7 a.m. As I finally lay down to sleep, my phone lit up once more. A text from May, something big is happening here tomorrow. All hands meeting called for afternoon. Be careful with whatever you're doing with Meridian. The pieces were moving faster than expected. Tomorrow would be decisive, one way or another. I arrived at Vertex headquarters before sunrise, the building quiet except for security and a few early risers. The CEO was already waiting in his office, coffee in hand, looking surprisingly alert for 7 a.m. This must be serious, he said as I entered, gesturing to a chair. Very. I connected my laptop to the display screen. I need to show you what I've learned about Meridian before my meeting with Rachel Davis. For the next 30 minutes, I methodically presented the evidence Sandra had provided, supplemented with my own analysis. Financial statements with impossible numbers. Internal emails discussing how to manage reporting. Actual client contract values versus what was represented to investors. The CEO's expression grew increasingly grave. By the end, he was pacing behind his desk. This is securities fraud, he said finally. They're trying to entangle us in a sinking ship. Exactly. He turned to me, eyes narrowing. And your former colleague, Sandra, she just handed this to you out of the goodness of her heart? Self-preservation, most likely, I admitted. She's implicated, though not as deeply as others. My guess is she's hoping to establish herself as a whistleblower before the SEC investigation becomes public. Smart woman. He sat down heavily. Cancel the meeting with Rachel. We're steering clear of this entire situation. I shook my head. With respect, I think that's a mistake. You want to proceed with partnership discussions knowing what we know? Not exactly. I outlined my alternative plan. We meet with them as scheduled. I present our partnership framework. But we record everything. Document every claim Rachel makes about Meridian's financial health and client relationships. Understanding dawned on his face. Evidence gathering. Precisely. If Rachel lies about Meridian's financial position during official partnership discussions, that strengthens any future case against them. Plus, it gives us leverage to protect Vertex if the scandal breaks while we're still in talks. The CEO studied me for a long moment. That's cold, calculated, and potentially risky. A slow smile spread across his face. I like it. But we need legal present. Already arranged. Our general counsel will join as a necessary party for preliminary negotiations. He nodded appreciatively. You've thought of everything. I had a good teacher in how not to do business, I replied, thinking of Tim. The CEO stood, extending his hand. Proceed with the meeting. Record everything. But commit to nothing. I want daily updates on how this plays out. Understood. As I left his office, I checked my phone. A new text from Tim. Rachel mentioned you're bringing your legal team to the initial discussion. Smart move. Shows you're serious. So Rachel and Tim were still in communication. Interesting. I responded briefly, standard procedure for potential partnerships. At 10 a.m. sharp, Rachel Davis arrived with 4 people in tow, 2 from their legal department, their new head of client services, who had replaced Tim, and most surprisingly, Sandra Peters. Sandra's face betrayed nothing as we exchanged professional greetings. If Rachel suspected she had been the source of my information, she gave no indication. Our general counsel suggested we begin with confidentiality agreements, which Rachel readily accepted. Once the paperwork was signed, I launched into my presentation of the proposed partnership framework. As you can see, I explained, gesturing to the projected slides, we envision a phased integration approach, beginning with the Goldstein pitch and expanding to other potential joint ventures based on performance metrics. Rachel nodded enthusiastically. This aligns perfectly with Meridian's strategic direction. Our financial position allows us to make significant investments in this partnership, particularly in the technology infrastructure required. Our lawyer interjected smoothly. Speaking of financial position, we'd need to see current statements beyond what's publicly reported before formalizing any agreement. Of course, Rachel smiled. Meridian's finances are stronger than ever, despite the temporary setbacks last quarter. Sandra can attest to that, can't you? All eyes turned to Sandra, whose professional composure slipped for just a millisecond. Our Q4 projections are promising, she said carefully. More than promising, Rachel insisted. We're projecting a 15% growth in EBITDA over last year. The client losses have been fully mitigated by new acquisitions and expanded contracts. I watched our lawyer subtly press the record button on his phone as Rachel continued making financial claims that directly contradicted the documents Sandra had provided. The meeting continued for 2 hours, with Rachel growing increasingly specific about Meridian's supposed financial strengths. With each false statement, she dug herself deeper, unaware that we had the documents proving otherwise. As we wrapped up, Rachel leaned forward eagerly. So when can we formalize this partnership? The Goldstein pitch deadline is approaching. We'll need to conduct standard due diligence, our lawyer replied. Financial reviews, client contract verification, the usual. Should take about 2 weeks. Rachel's smile faltered slightly. 2 weeks? That seems excessive for preliminary agreement. It's standard for partnerships of this magnitude, I assured her. We're very interested in moving forward, but we need to exercise appropriate caution. Of course, she recovered quickly. We have nothing to hide. Meridian is an open book. If only she knew how open that book had already become. After they left, our lawyer turned to me with raised eyebrows. She just committed at least 5 instances of material misrepresentation on a recorded conversation after signing an official disclosure agreement. I know. You realize what this means. I nodded. It means Meridian is in even worse shape than Sandra's documents suggested. And Rachel is desperate enough to commit fraud in pursuit of this partnership. What's your next move? I gathered my materials. We continue as planned. Due diligence. Documentation. And we prepare for the inevitable fallout. Back in my office, I found a message from Tim waiting. How did it go with Rachel? Moving forward. I didn't respond. Instead, I called May. That all-hands meeting at Meridian, I asked when she answered. What happened? It was weird, she replied in a hushed voice. Rachel announced a potential partnership with Vertex, made it sound like a done deal. Then said there would be structural changes coming to accommodate the new relationship. Everyone's freaking out about possible layoffs. She's setting the stage, I realized. Creating a narrative to explain whatever desperate moves come next. Alex, what's really going on? I've never seen the executives this tense. I hesitated, not wanting to put May at risk. Just update your resume, okay? And maybe start taking your personal items home from the office. That bad. Worse. After hanging up, I stared out my office window at the city skyline. 6 months ago, I'd been focused on personal vindication. Now I was at the center of what could become a major corporate fraud case. The stakes had escalated beyond anything I'd imagined when I walked out of Meridian that day. My phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. Rachel knows. Watch your back. And just like that, the endgame began. I arrived at Vertex headquarters before sunrise, the building quiet except for security and a few early risers. The CEO was already waiting in his office, coffee in hand, looking surprisingly alert for 7 a.m. This must be serious, he said as I entered, gesturing to a chair. Very. I connected my laptop to the display screen. I need to show you what I've learned about Meridian before my meeting with Rachel Davis. For the next 30 minutes, I methodically presented the evidence Sandra had provided, supplemented with my own analysis. Financial statements with impossible numbers. Internal emails discussing how to manage reporting. Actual client contract values versus what was represented to investors. The CEO's expression grew increasingly grave. By the end, he was pacing behind his desk. "This is securities fraud," he said finally. "They're trying to entangle us in a sinking ship." "Exactly." He turned to me, eyes narrowing. "And your former colleague, Sandra, she just handed this to you out of the goodness of her heart?" "Self-preservation, most likely," I admitted. "She's implicated, though not as deeply as others. My guess is she's hoping to establish herself as a whistleblower before the SEC investigation becomes public." "Smart woman." He sat down heavily. "Cancel the meeting with Rachel. We're steering clear of this entire situation." I shook my head. "With respect, I think that's a mistake." "You want to proceed with partnership discussions knowing what we know?" "Not exactly." I outlined my alternative plan. We meet with them as scheduled. I present our partnership framework. But we record everything. Document every claim Rachel makes about Meridian's financial health and client relationships. Understanding dawned on his face. Evidence gathering. Precisely. If Rachel lies about Meridian's financial position during official partnership discussions, that strengthens any future case against them. Plus, it gives us leverage to protect Vertex if the scandal breaks while we're still in talks. The CEO studied me for a long moment. "That's cold, calculated, and potentially risky." A slow smile spread across his face. "I like it. But we need legal present." "Already arranged. Our general counsel will join as a necessary party for preliminary negotiations." He nodded appreciatively. "You've thought of everything." "I had a good teacher in how not to do business," I replied, thinking of Tim. The CEO stood, extending his hand. "Proceed with the meeting. Record everything. But commit to nothing. I want daily updates on how this plays out." Understood. As I left his office, I checked my phone. A new text from Tim. "Rachel mentioned you're bringing your legal team to the initial discussion. Smart move. Shows you're serious." So Rachel and Tim were still in communication. Interesting. I responded briefly, standard procedure for potential partnerships. At 10 a.m. sharp, Rachel Davis arrived with 4 people in tow, 2 from their legal department, their new head of client services, who had replaced Tim, and most surprisingly, Sandra Peters. Sandra's face betrayed nothing as we exchanged professional greetings. If Rachel suspected she had been the source of my information, she gave no indication. Our general counsel suggested we begin with confidentiality agreements, which Rachel readily accepted. Once the paperwork was signed, I launched into my presentation of the proposed partnership framework. "As you can see," I explained, gesturing to the projected slides, "we envision a phased integration approach, beginning with the Goldstein pitch and expanding to other potential joint ventures based on performance metrics." Rachel nodded enthusiastically. "This aligns perfectly with Meridian's strategic direction. Our financial position allows us to make significant investments in this partnership, particularly in the technology infrastructure required." Our lawyer interjected smoothly. "Speaking of financial position, we'd need to see current statements beyond what's publicly reported before formalizing any agreement." Of course, Rachel smiled. "Meridian's finances are stronger than ever, despite the temporary setbacks last quarter. Sandra can attest to that, can't you?" All eyes turned to Sandra, whose professional composure slipped for just a millisecond. "Our Q4 projections are promising," she said carefully. "More than promising," Rachel insisted. "We're projecting a 15% growth in EBITDA over last year. The client losses have been fully mitigated by new acquisitions and expanded contracts." I watched our lawyer subtly press the record button on his phone as Rachel continued making financial claims that directly contradicted the documents Sandra had provided. The meeting continued for 2 hours, with Rachel growing increasingly specific about Meridian's supposed financial strengths. With each false statement, she dug herself deeper, unaware that we had the documents proving otherwise. As we wrapped up, Rachel leaned forward eagerly. "So when can we formalize this partnership? The Goldstein pitch deadline is approaching." "We'll need to conduct standard due diligence," our lawyer replied. "Financial reviews, client contract verification, the usual. Should take about 2 weeks." Rachel's smile faltered slightly. 2 weeks? That seems excessive for preliminary agreement. "It's standard for partnerships of this magnitude," I assured her. We're very interested in moving forward, but we need to exercise appropriate caution. Of course, she recovered quickly. We have nothing to hide. Meridian is an open book. If only she knew how open that book had already become. After they left, our lawyer turned to me with raised eyebrows. She just committed at least 5 instances of material misrepresentation on a recorded conversation after signing an official disclosure agreement. I know. You realize what this means. I nodded. It means Meridian is in even worse shape than Sandra's document suggested. And Rachel is desperate enough to commit fraud in pursuit of this partnership. What's your next move? I gathered my materials. We continue as planned. Due diligence. Documentation. And we prepare for the inevitable fallout. Back in my office, I found a message from Tim waiting. How did it go with Rachel? Moving forward. I didn't respond. Instead, I called May. That all-hands meeting at Meridian, I asked when she answered. What happened? It was weird, she replied in a hushed voice. Rachel announced a potential partnership with Vertex, made it sound like a done deal. Then said there would be structural changes coming to accommodate the new relationship. Everyone's freaking out about possible layoffs. She's setting the stage, I realized. Creating a narrative to explain whatever desperate moves come next. Alex, what's really going on? I've never seen the executives this tense. I hesitated, not wanting to put May at risk. Just update your resume, okay? And maybe start taking your personal items home from the office. That bad. Worse. After hanging up, I stared out my office window at the city skyline. 6 months ago, I'd been focused on personal vindication. Now I was at the center of what could become a major corporate fraud case. The stakes had escalated beyond anything I'd imagined when I walked out of Meridian that day. My phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. Rachel knows. Watch your back. And just like that, the endgame began. The next 48 hours unfolded like a corporate thriller. First came the anonymous leak to the financial press, detailed allegations of accounting fraud at Meridian, complete with enough specific information to make the claims credible. The stock immediately dropped 17% before trading was temporarily halted. Rachel Davis issued an emergency statement calling the allegations baseless and promising full cooperation with any inquiries. But the damage was done. By evening, the SEC had announced a formal investigation, and major clients were publicly reconsidering their relationships with the company. I wasn't behind the leak. That was almost certainly Sandra covering her tracks, but I was ready for the fallout. Vertex's CEO called an emergency meeting where we officially suspended all partnership discussions with Meridian, citing the developing situation. We've dodged a bullet, he told me afterward. Your instincts were spot on. From a safe distance, I watched the implosion. Meridian's board called for an independent audit. Rachel Davis made increasingly desperate public statements. 3 executives suddenly resigned for personal reasons. The stock continued its free fall once trading resumed. My phone buzzed constantly with updates from former colleagues, industry contacts, and surprisingly, Tim Richardson. You knew, his message read. Somehow you knew, and you played us all. I let that sit unanswered. There was a certain poetic justice in Tim realizing he'd been outmaneuvered at his own game. On the 3rd day after the leak, Sandra Peters formally resigned from Meridian, immediately positioning herself as a whistleblower cooperating with the SEC investigation. Clever move, it would provide her some protection and possibly immunity depending on what information she provided. That afternoon, I received a call from an unexpected source, Richard Henley, the Meridian board member who had once offered me that desperate vice president position. This is a disaster, he said without preamble. Rachel's been suspended. The SEC is crawling through our books. And we've lost 3 more major clients this morning. Sounds like you're having a rough week, Richard. Cut the crap, Alex. We both know you had a hand in this. I remained silent, neither confirming nor denying. He sighed heavily. Look, the board is bringing in crisis management. We need to salvage what we can of the company. There are still good people there, good clients. What does this have to do with me? We're looking for someone to lead the turnaround. Someone who knows the business inside out but isn't tainted by the current scandal. I actually laughed. You're offering me the CEO position? After everything? Not offering yet. Exploring the possibility. You'd have complete autonomy to rebuild, restructure, whatever it takes. The irony was almost too perfect. Richard, 6 months ago, you didn't think I was qualified to lead a department. Now you want me to save the entire company. Circumstances change, he replied stiffly. Yes, they do. I let the silence stretch for a moment. I'm not interested, but I appreciate the validation. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, absorbing the strange symmetry of it all. From undervalued employee to potential savior in 6 months. All because I had walked away and built something better elsewhere. That evening, Vertex's CEO called me into his office. The Goldstein account, he began without preamble. They've reached out directly to us. With Meridian effectively out of the running, they're considering accelerating their decision process. That's excellent news. He nodded. They specifically mentioned your name. Said they were impressed with your strategic vision during earlier discussions. I'll prepare our team for an accelerated pitch. There's more. He leaned forward. In light of recent events and your handling of the Meridian situation, the board has authorized me to offer you a new position. Executive Vice President of Strategic Growth. I blinked, genuinely surprised. You've proven yourself not just as a client manager, but as a strategic thinker who can navigate complex situations. We want to expand your role accordingly. The offer was everything I once thought I wanted from Meridian: recognition, advancement, respect. But the satisfaction I felt wasn't about the title or even the compensation package he outlined. It was about earning it fairly, based on merit rather than desperation. I'm honored, I said, and meant it. When would the transition begin? Immediately. We'll announce it next week, after the Goldstein pitch. As I left his office, my phone buzzed with a message from May. It's official. Meridian is laying off 30% of staff. Just got my notice. I responded immediately, send me your resume. Vertex is expanding. The next day, the Wall Street Journal ran a feature story on Meridian's collapse, including interviews with former employees about the toxic culture that had contributed to the ethical failings. Tim Richardson was quoted extensively, positioning himself as a victim of the leadership's poor decisions rather than a contributor to the problem. Nice try, Tim. I was quoted too briefly, as a former department head who departed 6 months prior to the accounting scandal. My only comment: success doesn't come from cutting corners or devaluing talent. It comes from building something with integrity. Westfield Insurance, one of the clients I'd brought to Vertex, called to congratulate me on the promotion they'd somehow already heard about. We made the right choice following you, their CEO said. Integrity matters in this business. After hanging up, I walked to the window of my office, soon to be my former office, as I moved to the executive floor. The view of the city was the same, but my perspective had completely changed. 6 months ago, I'd walked away from Meridian with nothing but my dignity and determination. I'd been hurt, angry, focused on proving Tim wrong. Now, I understood that the best revenge wasn't about destroying others or even seeing them fail by their own hand. It was about building something better for yourself. Something they couldn't take away or diminish. I'd moved beyond vindication to something more valuable, genuine success on my own terms. My assistant knocked on the door. Your team is waiting in the conference room to discuss the Goldstein pitch. Thank you. I'll be right there. I took one last look at the city skyline, then turned away from the window. The past was finished. The future was waiting. And unlike Tim, Rachel, and the others at Meridian, I was moving toward it with a clear conscience and clean hands. Sometimes, the best response to humiliation isn't retaliation. It's excellence. And that's exactly what I intended to deliver.